Hello, friends. Welcome to the Note Coach podcast. I'm your host, Suzanne Kohlberg. I have been known to say that self first isn't selfish. And that's why I'm super excited today to welcome Leigh Shulman. I didn't check the surname pronunciation. I should know that by now. This is like 400 and something episode, and I always check the first name. Anyway, Leigh is going to talk about her year or maybe more, because it started with a year of being selfish. And as soon as I saw that, I was like, I need to talk to you. Like, my listeners, we need to hear this wisdom. So how did it start? How did it come about? Was it a conscious decision? I have so many things. So basically take it away.
All right. So my year of selfish started so every year I choose a word that's going to be my guiding light for the year. And the funny thing is I always forget what the word is halfway through, or it really holds on like selfish did, and I learn a lot from it. So one year I had used self-care before, but selfish seemed to me to be a step further, because not only was it saying, oh, I'm going to take care of myself, it was saying, you know what, I am going to embrace the word selfish. I don't care if people call me selfish. You know what, I'm going to call myself selfish. Because selfish is usually such a bad word. And I think in particular, moms, women, we really suffer from that word because it's always a way to shut us down, to tell us that we're not doing enough for other people, when in my experience, particularly people who feel bad when they're called selfish aren't being selfish. Nobody who asks, am I being selfish, is actually selfish in my experience. If you're thinking about other people enough to wonder if you should be doing more, you're not selfish. So I just really wanted to embrace the word and kind of figure out, well, what does it mean? And then as I was making my choices throughout the whole year, I would ask myself, am I going to be selfish on this? What is the selfish thing to do here? And it taught me a lot about what I want and how much I give to other people that doesn't really benefit anyone.
That point, because sometimes we are giving to other people at the expense of ourselves. It's like our time, our energy, our money. And then it's certainly not in benefit to us if it's taking away from us. And then is it in service to them? Are they even appreciating it or acknowledging it? Because have you ever heard that song? Most of my listeners, protect your ears accordingly. I'm about to sing. It's like, don't it always seem to know that you don't know what you've got till it's gone? And it's like, people sometimes don't notice. And it's not that you weaponize as in like, I'm going to take this back. It's just like, I'm done with this. And all of this to say, yeah. And the other thing that you said that really stood out, if someone is got the wherewithal to ask, am I being selfish? Chances are it's a no. And I like to think of this. So if you're listening and you've got pen and paper handy, if you got a piece of paper and you drew a line across it, like those old school timelines for those of us who are, 40 plus, my kids don't do that anymore. It's all on the iPad. But anyway, a line across the page, and at one side you put selfless, and at the other side you put selfish. And then you write down all the things a selfless person would do and all the things a selfish person would do. And then in the middle, self-full, as in like, this is not taking away. My guess is you're hanging out so much around the selfless side that to you, what feels like, oh, it's so selfish, if you look at it written out like that, is actually only a couple of steps towards the middle, which is self-full. And it's funny, I've done this exercise with my kids and my son in particular, and not that long ago, and I've talked about this on the show before, but someone said to him, you're so full of yourself. Like, they said that, and he just looked them up and down. He's like, well, who else would I be full of? Like, he didn't take that as an insult. As you said, people weaponize it. You're selfish. You're a bitch. You're this. Like, it's a lashing out thing, usually controlling, get you to do what you want thing. And if someone says to me, like, you're a bitch now, I'm like, I am. I am. It's like, be that bitch. Because what's in it for me is not selfish. If you're like, hey, can you come help me move tomorrow at 6 a.m.? And I'm like, yeah, sure. What's in it for me? I'm not saying that I want you to pay me or whatever, but like, let's make this a win-win scenario. If you're like, hey, can you come help me move tomorrow at 6 a.m.? I'm going to have the tunes. I'm going to have breakfast delivered. I'm like, I'm in.
Absolutely. But the thing is, something like that, I'm going to help you move at 6 in the morning, but the person is going to have things set up. There's going to be food, and they're going to offer you the things that you physically need. That's not being selfish. That's called balance, and give and take. And I think it's really, like, I find a lot of relationships are not give and take. I hear a lot of people talking about it when I work one-on-one with people. I teach writing, and I see it a lot with writing, where people feel like they'll have a dream to write and they can't let go of their dream, and yet they feel selfish when they take time to write, which is partially where this whole selfish thing came in. It's like, but what does it mean when you're not doing the thing that is your dream? Like, what, like, how do you let go? Like, what, so someone else in your life, or you feel that someone else in your life wants you to put your dream aside. Well, what does that mean for the other person? And quite frankly, I don't want relationships like that. I don't want relationships where the people in my life are routinely asking me to put aside what's important to me, or making decisions about, is it frivolous? Is it important enough? Is it this, that, and the other? And they're not actually listening to me and what I want. Like, I don't really want those relationships. They don't work. You have to find that balance.
I think that's such a great thing because, yeah, are you literally, like, if you sit down and contemplate it, are you asking somebody to put their dream aside so that you can pursue yours? And if that's the case, as you said, is that a relationship, friendship, connection, workplace, whatever, that you want to stay in? Because you have agency, you have choice, and you might be like, oh, wow. Like, at the time of recording this, my sister has my kids. It's school holidays here. If you're listening to this, thank you. I love you. I appreciate you so much. And she doesn't have children of her own, though she is proxy my children. And she says to me, oh, I want to ask, do they want to help me in the garden? And I was like, honey, you're asking the wrong question. If you say, do you want to? My children are going to say no. They don't want to. But say, will you help me in the garden? There's a different story. And I think when we're asking people, like as you said, Suze, do you want to help me move house? No, I'd rather watch paint dry. But will you? I'm going to have good music playing, or I'm going to have, whatever. And I think sometimes it isn't selfish, like, actually, and also the physical limitations that you have. I have a bad back, so packing boxes and lifting boxes isn't great for me physically. And in the past, I would have just put my stuff, ignored my body, and been like, sure. But now I'd be like, actually, that isn't the best for me. What I could do, I could watch your kids. I could bring you food, because like when you're moving, chances are you just eat and take away and it's horrible. Like, what could you do instead that, as you said, is a win-win for everyone, rather than you just saying, no, oh, she's so selfish or she's so self-centered. And it's like, yeah, but I am, because I'm looking after my physical needs first, and I'm not putting my body on the line for you, when you could hire a mover, someone who does this for a job. And that's the other thing too. If you ask me to pack up your vases or something, and you get to the other end and they're all smashed, and then all these stories you make up, I don't know how, like, I understand it conceptually, but as opposed to somebody who it's their job, like, would you ask me to drill into your brain? I don't think so. And if you did, it would be a definite no. But, sometimes we ask people things that are beyond their skill set, or we compare it to, expectation, reality. And it's like, who did you ask to do this?
Exactly. And I think you make a really good point. I think, like, say, oh, I'm not going to hire a brain surgeon. I'm going to just ask a family member to do it. We would never, ever do that, because it doesn't make any sense. And we know all the reasons it doesn't make sense. But I think that can apply in a lot of other places. If we were to say, oh, this person has a bad back, I don't think I want to ask them to move. My mom was in the hospital recently, and the hospital was downtown in Atlanta. And a friend of hers who called all the time, who checked everything, who had a WhatsApp group with a bunch of other friends, just sort of keeping track of things. I didn't ask her to go down to the hospital, because I know that she has eye problems and can't drive. it's dangerous for her. It doesn't help my mom. It doesn't help anybody. And that, you know, when you said before, you're like, I won't come and help you. I don't think it's the best idea for me to pack, but what if I did this? Is incredible. It's actually really thoughtful. Like, I don't consider that selfish. It's taking your needs into account, and it's saying, hey, this isn't the best thing I can do. However, what about this? And to me, that's literally the opposite of selfish, because it's thoughtful. It's saying, hey, there's some needs here that you may not have thought you needed. Let me try and fill them. Which, I don't know, when somebody does that for me, you know, when somebody goes out of their way to think about what I might need and then give that to me, that's really touching. And that to me is probably one of the most selfless things that you can do. And yet, by putting the boundaries on it and saying, okay, I'm not going to do this thing that will hurt me, I will instead show up in another way, is like a perfect balance of everything. And again, I think, you know, I've really tried to move away from people who don't want to hear the part where I'm saying, I don't want to do it exactly your way. I want to do it a little bit differently. Because, you know, and I feel that sometimes, where sometimes I'm like, no, I have to do it my way. And then I have to pull myself back and be like, no, well, why? Is there a real reason it needs to be done that way? Or can we do it differently? And in my year of being selfish, I sort of turned that kind of questioning on myself. Like, every single time somebody asked me for something, I would ask myself, do I really want this? And if the answer was no, I said no. And one thing I found out was sometimes I don't know what I want. So I'll go back and forth. So here's an example. My daughter, I needed to go to Buenos. I live in Argentina, and I don't live in Buenos Aires, but that's where I have to go to renew my passport. And I had to go there to renew my passport. So, and I was trying to decide, do I want to go with my daughter? Do I want to invite her to come? Or do I want to go by myself? And I didn't know. I really, I didn't know what I wanted, because there were different things. Like, I mean, I know the city, I don't have a problem traveling there, but I wasn't sure I really wanted to spend the night there by myself doing what, you know, whatever. Or did I want to spend time with my daughter, but she was busy, and sometimes travel, like, I love spending time with her, but sometimes I don't always enjoy traveling with her when I have something very specific I need to do. So it was sort of this balance of, and what it made me realize is I don't always know what I want. And it made me really tune into, what is it that I want here? And it also made me realize, like, my own fears. I didn't even realize that I had a fear of being on my own in the city for a night or two, because I travel all the time. I've been traveling for years. I live in another country. I do lots of things on my own. Why would I suddenly feel anxious about that? And so not only did being selfish and doing what I really wanted and what was best for me highlight the places where I am curtailing my own independence by doing things for other people because I am scared of not doing it, of whether it's me being on my own or leaving an old pattern or trying something new or whatever it might be. And it made my world a lot bigger when I could say, oh, actually, I would like to do this in theory, but the reason I don't is because I'm scared, or I don't know how, or I don't want to ask for help, or whatever it might be. And then in doing those things that kind of scare you, your world gets a little bigger. And I am all about making your world, you know, with kids, like we always say with kids, you know, like, what kids stay home and they're meant to explore the world and do all this. And they're like, oh, explore the world when you're in your 20s, when you're young. And I kind of feel it's the opposite, because, you know, a baby is fascinated by a plant, by a wall, by anything. An adult is not. We do want a bigger world. We do want to explore more. And the more we use our brains, the bigger our worlds get, the more, what is the word? The more we can do that, and the more we can continue to do that. So whereas, you know, you know, it's very easy when you know, you have a family, you have a routine, you have the way you always do things, to get very caught in that, so that you stop asking questions about, do I really want this? Because that's the way it's always been done. And sometimes, yeah, sometimes having, you know, I think having a routine, having habits are crucial. It saves time. It gets you into the habit. It gets you into doing things that are right for you. But always, not always, but occasionally go back and question, hey, is this still right for me? Because I think we can very easily find out things are wrong for us because we haven't really thought about it in a while. And then you're doing all these things that you don't really want to do just because you've always done them and other people expect you to do them.
I love that. You've so much you said there. But the biggest thing was sometimes often you don't know what you want. Like, so sometimes on your path to being selfish, instead of going, if you say, you know, what do you want? I remember someone asking me a number of years ago, what are your hobbies? I was like, I'm a mum. I like to pee alone. You know what I mean? My kids are older now, but sometimes it's like you don't know what you want, but you can start with what you don't want. I don't want to be the one who drops everything and goes and does something. I don't want to be the one who's helping my kid with their project at 10 p.m. the night before it's due because they didn't tell me they had it and now I'm building a diorama. Like, do you know, all of these things and starting to be selfish and saying no. Very recently, I took my son to school. I was going into the city. So dropping my son at school and then I was going home. My husband and I have one car. So he had the car. So I was going to catch a train. So I walk my son to school. And when we get there at the gates, I was helping him with his helmet. He's on the spectrum. So he really struggles with fine motor. And I was like, I'll clip your helmet onto your bag because he rides his scooter. And then you go in and I'll go home. And I went to clip his helmet on. And I was like, oh, he doesn't have his bag. Like he forgot his school bag. And I was like, if I walk home, get his bag, walk back, drop it off, walk home to get to the train, I'm gonna miss my event in the city. Like it's not gonna happen. I'm like, well, dude, you're gonna have to have a day without your backpack. You're gonna have to ask friends, can I borrow pens, pencils, paper, whatever. Fortunately, the school has an online canteen. So as long as I ordered before 9 a.m., I could organize lunch. So I was like, you're not gonna starve. And there's the bubblers or water fountains, depending where you live, what you call them. So yeah, you'll be fine. But he was like, I can't be without my bag, like all this sort of stuff. And I'm like, well, obviously you can. But, you know, in the past, it would have been like, oh, I'll just miss what I had planned. I was like, no, I'm being selfish. I'm going to the city. I'm going to see Hamilton. I've been waiting for this for months. You sort it out. And also, too, he hasn't forgotten his bag since. Every morning, he's like, where's my bag? Whereas if I had been like, I'll miss my show. I'll go home. I'll get your bag. It's fine. I think sometimes when we're selfless to the point that people can be, they can't be inconvenienced, but we can, we're not teaching them anything. The same as with my daughter. Like one night she had this project and I was like, when's it due? And she's like, tomorrow around here. So I'm like, well, you're going to fail, aren't you? And she was horrified. You're the worst mother in the world, all this sort of stuff. And I'm like, how long have you known about this? 4 weeks. When did you tell me about this? 5 minutes ago. And how am I the worst mother in the world? Your inability to be organized, not my problem. And people might listen to this and go, oh, she's such a bitch. And I'm like, yes, I am. And I want my kids to learn this lesson while they're in primary school and it doesn't really matter, as opposed to when they're trying to go for a career or a job or something where there's things on the line. Because I can't be at their job interview for them being the ventriloquist thing. I can't be making their lunch or getting their uniform ready while they're going into an office. Like they need to learn these skills now. And sometimes, you know, tough love, whatever you want to call it. But yeah, I'm done with not peeing alone and not doing anything for me and not having any hobbies because this sucks.
Yeah, you lose yourself with that. And what you said is exactly why I've never had a problem disciplining. And I mean, I'm a gentle, okay, I do gentle discipline, but that whole thing, it's like, well, what if I won't have my bag today? I'm like, well, yeah, you won't. Um, you know, and I think there are I know a lot of parents and, you know, who usually moms who will run back and do it and who will, you know, and they have jobs and they have full-time things and they have their hobbies and they have all their things, but they will go back and forth like that. But I don't want to. And because I don't know, like, but like, why should we have to? But even in addition to that, exactly what you said, you know, you're not going to be at the job interview, but even more, you know, like you're setting people up for skills for the rest of their lives and what they can expect from people in relationships. So I see that as a real kindness, you know. I mean, I know we've all seen people like this where they're 30, 40, 50 years old and you see them and you're like, my 10-year-old acts like that, or my 5-year-old acts like that, or you're having a tantrum. And like, that's, you know, and I get like people there, you know, a lot of times people make a lot of space for people to be very immature while adults. But when I think about that, I was like, if my adding structure to my child's life and setting limits and saying no keeps them from growing up, from not maturing as they grow up, then it's my job to do that. Not only is it, and it helps me, it helps them. But like when you think about what do I want for my kids, I want my kids to grow up and have fulfilling relationships with people where there's a real give and take and they love each other and respect each other. Well, I don't know. Even something as small as, asking someone what time it is when you have your phone in your hand. I'm not your watch. I am not your clock. You have a phone. I am here for lots of different things, but I'm not here to keep you organized. Slightly less so with kids. I don't mean this as much with kids, but to some extent, but definitely with the adults in my life. I want to be there for you. I want to have a great relationship with you. I want to support you. I also want that back. And me being your watch and your note taker
Or you
is not going
Google.
to do that.
Like if they don't know the answer and you don't know it, so you Google it for them, it's like they could Google it
Yeah.
themselves. So,
Mhm.
it's just kind of like that for me has been one of my biggest pet peeves. When people ask me something, I'm like, I don't know. That could you Google it? And I'm like, can't you? So
There is, there's a website called Let Me Google That for You. And when you Google it, when you put the question in, what it does is it brings up a link. The person clicks on it. It is so obnoxious. And basically, you watch it type out the question that they should have typed for themselves and then bring it up. So it's very
I'll have to
snarky.
check that out. I
It's
love
snarky.
it. But I think sometimes what is the person really asking for? What are they really wanting? And I think sometimes, they're wanting connection, or they're wanting to be acknowledged, or they're wanting something else, which they don't have the skill set, as you said, maybe emotionally immature or stunted or whatever. And it's just kind of like learning to grow through that, or choosing who you surround yourself with, because I no longer surround myself with people who I'm basically their note keeper, their Google, their this. And even having appointments and stuff, I'm not your Google Calendar. I personally live my life by my Google Calendar. And if I'm meeting up with somebody, I'll send them a Google invite. If they've accepted it, I don't then message beforehand and go, are we going to meet or whatever. I trust it's in their Google Calendar too. And sometimes when we get there or they're late or they don't turn up and I'm like, hey, what's happening? I don't use Google Calendar. Well, how did you manage to accept the invite? Like, how do you track your day? How I just, and also it's not my job. Like, even
No,
people who pay me, who work with me, I'm like, I'm your coach. I'll help you with your mindset and your conversation, this and that, and the other. I will not manage your diary. Like, my system automatically sends a 24-hour to go and a 1 hour to go reminder. That's not me there at the keyboard going, hey, Leigh, our call's on. Because also, too, we're around the world. I've got no idea what time it is for you. I imagine it's the day before. Like, here, it's already Thursday. And so it's like when
yeah,
people message me and they go, oh, I'm going to see you at 10 p.m. or 8 p.m. or 6 p.m. or whatever, I'm like, this means nothing to me, because it's a whole other day here. And I think sometimes it's if it's about like co-regulation or comfort or connection or whatever, then ask for that, but don't ask something that somebody could Google or whatever. It's just, I don't even tell my kids, I don't micromanage them that much. Like, they both have devices now and people can debate with me ages and stages and stuff, but they're going to need them for school. So anyway, but like I've showed them how to set an alarm. And we leave for school at this time. Set your alarm for 10 minutes before. Make sure you have your drink, your shoes, and now your backpack, because that was a. But what's really
mhm.
funny is my kids are as snarky as me. So sometimes when they're at school, I'll hear one of their iPads go off, and I'll go, "What's happening?" And I'll go, and then, because you know how you can write a word, it'll be alarm to annoy mummy. and,
Well,
and then my daughter did that once a few months back, and then it went off again like 10 minutes later. And then I got savvy and went into the thing, and she'd set it to go every 10 minutes. I'm like,
God,
wow, I love it. But
that's so
it's just kind of like you teach people how to treat you. You teach people what you will and won't stand for. And if you don't want to do it and they're gonna label you and call you and whatever, then they can go find someone else. They're not the only person on the world. So back to your year of being selfish, because we've done a roundabout thing.
yeah.
What year was it, out of curiosity? Like, how long ago did you do
I,
it?
I think it was 2021. So it was the year after the pandemic,
Oh,
like
yeah.
the real full-on lockdown of the pandemic. And the thing is, the pandemic was both terrible, and it was obviously horrifying in many, many ways. But because we didn't see people, we didn't really do the same things. It really was a year where I just did what I wanted. And, I have a friend who says we need 1 month of pandemic every year, just so like, where I woke up really early and I would have a couple hours. I would actually have, I was actually in New York right before the lockdown started, and I flew back to Argentina, and literally I had a stopover in Panama, and while I was in the air between Panama and Argentina shut down all flights from the US because the pandemic was much heavier there. But because I was coming from Panama, nobody even asked me. So I did ask a doctor, and I was like, should I do like a friend? I was like, should I do like my own quarantine? He's like, yeah, do 2 weeks of quarantine. So I was in our room, and our room is actually it's like there's enough space. It has its own bathroom, and it has a balcony outside, and it overlooks the mountains and trees. So it was a really, really nice place to be. And I remember when I put it in the parent group, which is, 99% moms. I said, just so you know, this is what happened. I don't have it, but I haven't been near the kids, da 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 da. And all the moms were like, oh, how terrible. 2 weeks on your own and you can't leave your bedroom, but it was, it was, so you can't wash dishes, you can't do anything around the house for 2 weeks. And, it like, obviously I didn't love every part of it, but I can't say that there weren't, like, I lost track of time. I did what I wanted when I wanted. I would find like, oh, I was tired at 8, I would go to sleep at 8, and then I'd wake up in the middle of the night and I maybe would do some work, or I would do this, that, and the other. And like one of the things that once I was out of quarantine, I kept waking up at 4 in the morning. And so I kind of started a morning ritual that, like, let me just say, I don't know if you do morning rituals or if any of your listeners are interested in them. They always start my day off. Every day that I do my morning ritual is going to be a better day than when I don't. And if I have a lot on my mind, or I'm really stressed, it just gets rid of the stress. And during the pandemic, like, I really had time to do it for as long as I wanted. And because the kids weren't going to school, I didn't have to wake, and nobody got up until 9. So by the time, my son's first class was at 9. Once the online classes started, I had 5 hours in the morning entirely to myself to do whatever I wanted with no one else around. And I don't really have that now. And for me, there's something about it being dark and nobody's doing anything and nobody is awake that for me just gives me a space that I love. And I use that time. I wrote 2 books, and, I meditated every single morning, and people talk about productivity, and sometimes I feel like that's a word that kind of can take on its own weird meaning. It takes on kind of cultish meaning sometimes.
Productivity and authentic, I think, are 2 words that have really, been
Yeah.
weirdly.
And there's another one, manifesting also. I'm not a
Oh,
fan of that.
yes.
But what I will say is, what I found is that when I take care of myself first, when I put my needs first, and I make really clear boundaries, I'm happier, I get more done, and the people around me are happier too.
It's such a great way of describing it, because for just over a month now, I've had a meditation practice. I've wanted one for years, but anyway, cut a long story short, I meditate twice a day for 20 minutes. And for the first 2 weeks, I just did it in the morning before everybody was awake, so nobody knew about it. But when I started the afternoon practice, I obviously told everybody in the family about it because, and it's funny, sometimes the kids burst in, like, kids are kids, and like, oh, mummy's meditating. Burst back out again. They're like, oh, I'm so sorry. Or, or they're like, are you meditating? But you can notice a difference. For me, it's in my sleep. And sometimes in the back of my mind, I don't have time for this. Like 20 minutes twice a day, it feels like so much time. But the time that I get back, because I'm not stressed, the little things that happen, it's funny, at the time of recording this, before Leigh and I jumped on, I thought, I'll just quickly fix something on my website. It'll take 2 minutes. Anyway, I broke something on my website. And in the past, I would have been like so distracted by that, wouldn't have been able to be in the call. I only just remembered it as we were talking about this. Little things like that don't bother me anymore, because I'm like, if somebody really wants to buy something from me and my website's down for an hour, is it the worst thing in the world? Like, if you have to wait. And I think sometimes in our pressure of hyper productivity, hacks, time saving, all this, we've lost sight of, like, it's worth waiting for. And as you said, that self first, that time for you first thing in the morning. I love it too when it's dark and it's quiet, no one else is awake. But I've also carved out a little pocket in the afternoon, and I do it just before dinner, and I let people know, hey, this is, do you need anything? Because I'm going to take my 20 minutes now. And the evening, I just find, like, because dinner, there can be the eat your dinner, I don't like you. That doesn't seem to happen now. So I just think it's really powerful, but you have to carve that out. You have to advocate for it. You have to not explain it. You don't have to explain yourself to anyone, but let people know what you're doing. Because I think sometimes we just expect them to know. And it's like, however much they want to know. My daughter doesn't give two shits, but my son's fascinated. So sometimes he'll actually come and do it with me, except after 2 minutes he's bored and he leaves. I'm like, I don't mind as long as you leave quietly. But it's like, people aren't mind readers.
And and I think sometimes we do have this fear of letting people know what we're doing because they're going to give us their opinion. And um, like, okay, so when we decided we were going to sell everything in New York, we came from Brooklyn, we left and traveled for a while. When we decided we were going to do that, we didn't tell anybody. Well, we only told a few people who we knew would be supportive. We didn't tell our families until we'd already sold our house and there was nowhere
That's
for us to stay.
awesome.
And there was no going back. And I remember there was one family member where I remember, and she was just like, well, wait, what? Like, you did what? I'm like, yeah, we're moving, we're traveling, we'll see you later. We'll be around, but, because, and that's the whole thing, like, to do the things you really want in life, to create space to do them. And I think, it's counterintuitive to say, if you want to get more done in the afternoon, meditate or go for a walk after lunch. It's so counterintuitive to say that. And yet, like, just as individual human beings, that people are like, no, I can't do that. And I find myself doing that. Oh, I can't take a break now. But the reality is, and there's science behind it. I actually put together a webinar on this, productivity for writers. And it ended up being all about self-care, because the more research I did, the more that I found that all the things that you do to take care of yourself make you more balanced, more level-headed. You have better mental health, you have better physical health, and you get more done. And
Yeah.
it's easier to know what you want when you're not exhausted and pulled in a lot of directions. So, my whole point was, this isn't just be selfish. I said, be selfish. This is my year of selfish, because I wanted to use the word selfish, because I thought it was really important to kind of reclaim it and not feel bad about saying I'm being selfish. Like when you say, you're being selfish. I'm sorry you feel that way. The worst apology ever.
Oh, I had this whole discussion with somebody recently. They're like, I don't want to apologize. And I was like, if I don't want to apologize, like, I don't think that I'm wrong, but the person's demanding or whatever and whatever, I will say, I'm sorry you feel that way. And it is amazing how many people are happy with it. If someone ever says that to me, that's immediately red flag to a bull. I'm like, that's not an apology. But that
No.
gets you over the line so much of the time, because people are righteous and they just want to hear that I'm sorry. And then they hear that and just zone out. And it's like, we can have a difference of opinion. Like, as you said, you might label that as selfish, but I'm labeling this as I said, I say self first. Self first isn't selfish. Or as you said, in service, because I'm thinking, for anyone who's listening, I'm sure we can all think of an example of a time where you were doing something, it's late at night. You're like, I'm just going to finish that email. I'm just going to finish that blog post. I'm just going to finish that chapter. I'm just going to balance my checkbook, whatever it is. And you're tired, you're exhausted, the screen's kind of blurry, it's taking so long, and eventually you might just be like, fuck it, and go to bed. And then in the morning, the thing that you spent 2 hours on the night before and still couldn't fix, in 5 minutes, done. And it's like, what if you were just like, I'm going. So a couple of months back, maybe not that long ago, but anyway, that new Deadpool Wolverine movie thing came out. And I had stuff to do. Didn't have any client facing, no podcast recording, but I had a lot of behind the scenes stuff to do. But I was done. My son had just had surgery. He'd finally gone back to school. My daughter's applying for high school. Like, there's lots of capacity required. And I was just like, I don't have the mental space to do all this. It's like, I said to my husband, he had an RDO, roster day off. I was like, you want to go see that new Deadpool movie? He's like, yeah. So we dropped the kids at school, went to the movies. There's no one else there because it's like the middle of the day. And then the next day, I had so much energy. I felt like Kermit at the keyboard. I was like, ding, 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 ding. I was like, had I forced myself to follow up on all those emails and answer all that stuff because, my kids had been sick and whatever, I could have done it, but it would have taken the exact same amount of time that if I'd given myself that whole day to luxuriate at the movies and whatever. And I think that's what, that people don't think. Taking the time to meditate or walk or stretch or journal or whatever it is, I don't have time for this. It's like, what's that saying? If you don't have time to be sick, because you burn out, you get stressed, you get depleted, and then you wonder why you stay up late eating chips and watching Netflix with a disrespect for tomorrow. Or for me, one more chapter. I cannot read late in the evening because I'm like, one more chapter. Oh shit, it's 2 a.m. kind of person.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's really true. And I mean, the thing is, like, I want to just say that I've said it already, but I just want to say this again. It literally, there is science that supports everything we're saying. It's not just us being like, oh, authentic, da, da, da. There's literal science behind it. And I'll tell you something, if anybody wants to contact me, I have a webinar with slides that has all of it in it because I
And please
included
do
all the
that for anyone
research.
listening. Some people really want the science behind it. It's fascinating. I have a medical science background and a research background. I've done a thesis and all sorts of stuff. And I used to be like, show me the science, show me the meta-analysis, show me the data. And now I'm more of a trial and error because what does it feel like for me? Because sometimes people are like, oh, you should, I can't stand, you should feel like this. I still remember when everyone was on the, what do you call it, kombucha bandwagon. And I was like, oh, okay. And everyone's like, you should. That stuff made me feel like shit because my gut was that inflamed that adding, sauerkraut and stuff to it just made the whole situation worse. So all that to say, if you want the science, contact Leigh. She'll send it all your way or trial it. But when you trial it, don't trial it for a day or a week. Like if your body is that stressed, overdrawn or whatever, sometimes it takes a while for you to feel the effects because you're still winding down from being so overstrong.
Right. And it really is trial and error. Just one example, talking about morning rituals or whatever you do in the morning. So there's a book by Hal Elrod called The Morning Miracle, and he lays out a specific, I don't remember, it's SAVERS is the
Yeah,
acronym,
there's
but
like 5 things you do for 10 minutes each or something. Yeah.
yes, yeah. And it's sometimes it's a little much, or some of them I don't really want to do. So I started with that and I tried it, but then I realized like some things I don't really feel like doing, or sometimes I'm not in the middle of a book or the book I'm reading isn't something I want to read in the morning. So I'll skip that part. But I always do, and I don't actually do writing in the morning because I write all day. But or when I was during the pandemic, my writing, instead of doing like journal writing, which is what he suggests, I wrote my book. And it wasn't 10 minutes, it was like an hour and a half. And I'll tell you the real benefit of it is I really fell in love with writing by doing that, which is a weird thing I've been writing my whole life. I've been teaching writing for like 20, 30 years. And yet I didn't, and people talk about resistance and how you're always going to, and that's true, you will always face resistance. But it's so much easier to get past resistance when you love what you're doing. Because I know for a fact that once I sit down and start writing, that I will be in it really soon. And that happened to me this weekend. Like I decided, like right now, I'm not actively working on anything because I have other projects and other launches coming up. And I just decided like I want to write. I feel like I'm putting together courses and I'm doing this launch where I'll be teaching classes and all these different things. And I love doing that, but I was missing the writing. So Saturday morning, I just started, I have a book, it's printed out, and I'm reading it, and I started taking notes, and the next thing you know, it's like 10 o'clock on a Saturday morning. I'm like through the first act and I've restructured it, and I'm loving doing it, and I don't want to stop. And I feel like whether you're a writer, whether there's something else, or a scientist, or whatever it is that you love doing, when you give yourself permission to do it, however it's going to do, whatever role it's going to take, whatever time it's going to take up, whatever it might push out the way, you do yourself a service. You really do yourself a service.
I love
Mm.
that because, yeah, it's going to take time. Some things might need to be pushed out of the way, but if you love it, then it's kind of like, you see people who play instruments and whatever. And some people like, here, I'm doing the scales because my parents make me or because of whatever. And some people it's like, I just love to play. And
Mm.
you can feel the energy of that in the creation or the music or whatever. But we literally could talk for hours because there's just there's so much overlap here. But as we bring this to a close, let the listeners know what it is that you do, where they can find you, and about your books, please.
Of course. All right. So I teach writing, and that's a very large way of saying it. But basically, anyone who wants to write, wherever you are, whether you just think, I'd like to write one day, or you're an experienced writer, and anywhere in between, I have something for you. So I run a community. It's called the Inspired Writer Community. And that's all about, first, when we were talking about what do you want, first it's making a plan. And the number one question is, what is it that you want? And then you build out sort of a business plan for your writing, because I like to look at business writing as a business, particularly if you want to make money from it and fit it into the rest of your life. You want to kind of have all the pieces and as much in place as possible. So there's that community, and whatever kind of writing you want to do, it's great for that. I also run workshops, and I do one-on-ones, and I have online courses. So really anything you want to do related to writing, I'm here to help. And a lot of and so if you're one of those people I was talking about who, like, you want to write, there's an idea for a book or a story that you've been wanting to do, but you haven't had time for it, please contact me. It's a half an hour conversation, and we'll talk about it. And the way you can reach me is when you go to my website. It's leishulman.com. So leigshulman.com/podcast. And there'll be a little form where you can give me your name, email, and then tell me a little bit about yourself and what you're looking for, and and I find a lot of times people contact me and they'll just sort of just, people call it vomiting on the page. And they'll just tell me all this stuff about themselves. And I think people feel really self-conscious when they do that. I love it when people do that, because I want you to be you. It's fine. I want to know who you are. And like whenever someone does that, I feel like, yeah, let's talk more. There's a lot going on here. So that is one of the best ways to contact me. Whatever curiosity, questions, whatever you have, sign up for it and we can talk. And then the other place you can find me is on Instagram, where I'm the Leigh Shulman, TheLeighShulman, because somebody took my name for some reason. And basically on Instagram, on my feed, you'll see every workshop, all the things that I offer, and you'll see what interests you. And if you comment, I always write back.
I
So
love
it's a
that.
great place to get in touch with me.
Thank you so much, Lee. And I really encourage you, everyone listening, reach out, check out her resources. And yeah, if you want the science stuff, send her a message and ask. And I think that's another thing
Absolutely.
too. Be selfish. Ask for what you want. It's like modeling what we've been talking about here. So thank you so much for joining me. Thank you everyone for listening. Bye for now.